Hey, how's everyone doing today? So we're going to be talking about some playoff scenarios. So as you can see, this is the Eastern Conference. Look how close up it is. Most interesting part, I think we would have expected the West to be as competitive. Now, believe it or not, it is. But I tell you what, that 9, 10, even 8 spot, that compared to the Eastern Conference. I mean, Eastern Conference, you have to be 500 or above, really, just to make it. And so Eastern Conference again this year is very well rounded, but I would say, the Bulls were probably a much better team earlier on than they were projected to be. So they've kind of leveled out in a way. So for them, their last nine games are going to be important. But as you can see, these matchups, the Celtics and the Bulls, they're both, it could very well go 4 or 5 into the playoffs, but I'm seeing that the Celtics had started maybe even as the 12th seed, as low probably since November, but you can see they've been crawling up since 2022, and they're projected even to go number one if you're looking closely. So the Heat are kind of struggling right now, getting into fights. Sixers are working on chemistry with Harden and Embiid, but they're clearly a much better team. Really, the Eastern Conference, best of the best, as well as the Bucks. So that 2-3 matchup is definitely one of the toughest. For the Celtics' upcoming game, it's very likely they win out. So for them, I mean, actually, all their games are tough. The Bulls, the Bucks, and the Grizzlies, if they're all competing by that time. The Heat, Raptors, Timberwolves. Timberwolves this year have been really good. But for Eastern Conference, the biggest challenge, some of these matchups, I believe, when you get to the 7, 8, 9, 10. So I believe the Cavaliers are going to fall to the 7th spot. The Raptors go up to 6, or the Nets overtake both the Raptors and the Cavaliers. But with a game still left against the Hawks, I think the Hawks might be the Nets in there. So I can see the Hawks can only really go as high, win 8 more games, so they can only go as high as the 5th seed if everyone else loses out. So that's interesting projection, but I feel like when we get to it, Hawks might be as high as the 7th, maybe even the 6th, with what's going on with the Cavaliers and all their injuries and things like that. For the Bulls, I think the injury with Lonzo did kind of affect them. But they kind of believe their own hype at the same time. I think the Cavaliers fall to the play-in tournament. They were the number 1 seed at one point. The Nets could clearly again win out, but for them, their next 9 games are going to be very competitive. So, all I can tell you is that the top 4 is set. Ironically, how the Celtics were starting the season, it is pretty remarkable what they were capable of. They went 1-9. You see, their last 10 games. The Western Conference again, the Lakers are historically bad. I think, with what LeBron has been able to do with 30 points per game and all that stuff, all the other stats with rebounds and assists. I mean, LeBron James has done everything he could. Westbrook had an all-time really terrible season. Statistically, it's decent for everybody else, but you can tell Westbrook isn't at the same level. But it's more of a mental thing, It's really since, people were joining him for wearing a skirt. He had been playing up to his potential. But he has the occasional here and there game against the Hornets, Rockets, all these other teams. He can drop game winners, 50-point shots, game tying shots, but you see a lot of air balls, a lot of crazy turnovers, just passing the ball to the other team. Zion is not really playing for the Pelicans, but also Brandon Ingram's having an all-time season, and CJ McCollum was a perfect pickup for the Pelicans even without Zion. So you can imagine what would have been with Zion, but healthy. I mean, he's probably all right, but they didn't want to play him. He did a through the legs dunk the other day, a couple days ago, so that was when he was declared out for the season. So he was clearly okay. the little Instacart thing up there. Uh, Timberwolves are definitely having one of the best seasons they've ever had in franchise history. Up there with that 2004 season. So I say that the Timberwolves could very well get out of the play-in with that 7-8, knock the Nuggets in there against the Clippers. Them fighting for a position there. The Lakers very well could win against the Pelicans, or I'm not going to rule out that the Spurs come back. And maybe even I'm gonna say it's over. The Spurs might overtake the Pelicans, but with the Lakers, they have to want it. If they don't want it, they can let the Spurs take their position. But I'm seeing it like how I'm seeing it. Next game with the Pelicans is against the Spurs, and their next game is against the Lakers. So it could be really great for the Pelicans or really bad. But CJ is such a great player. How they beat the Hawks the other day. So yeah, I feel like with all these matchups, the play-in tournaments are definitely the most unpredictable to predict, because that 7-8 matchup in both conferences and the 9-10 are pretty competitive. If the Nets are against the Cavaliers, it's automatic, really. As great as the Cavs would be at home or even on the road, I'd say the Nets would win. But with the Raptors, I feel like if the Nets were on the road in Toronto, it'd be hard. So with it tied, I feel like the Raptors are going to work their way out of the play-in. Just like with the West, I feel like the Timberwolves can very well work their way out. If they don't, they can probably beat the Clippers or, go against the Lakers. And Westbrook had some choice words for the the Timberwolves, saying that they hadn't accomplished anything. But, Westbrook hadn't made it out of the first round since he had, oh my goodness, who did he have? Kevin Durant. So that's something to keep in mind. All right, everybody, stay tuned.